The sin of empathy. Gaming without empathy to me is hollow, and so would a faith without empathy be. We're going to be talking about this tonight. This is the reason, well, not the only reason, I just like Steve too, but also Steve put out an interesting series of posts recently that I wanted to highlight and support. This has been a conversation that's been going on. Before we get too far into laying the groundwork, let's kick things off with a little bit of a thought experiment. So I'm going to be approaching this from the angle of a gamer's perspective. Imagine if every game you've ever played removed every single choice. No moral dilemmas, no branching paths, no relationships. You just do the thing because the game says to do it. Do you think that would still be meaningful? For me, and for my Games for Impact love and friend here, probably not. Now, obviously, not every game is going to need to be a deep emotional narrative. Some games are more about skill or mechanics, competition, but some games are all about reading into unspoken lore. Some might not even have words, that they just present things straightforward. But in games where moral choice is the core mechanic, where the whole point is deciding who you want to be, who you want to choose to be, empathy is what makes those choices matter. When we apply that to our faith, what happens if we remove empathy from Christianity? If faith becomes a system of rules and consequences and no humanity? That is what we're going to be diving into today. Why empathy is being framed as a sin, what's really at stake if we go down that road, and why both gaming and faith fall apart when empathy is removed. This is a pretty recent move, at least as far as I have seen it. It was maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I can trace back if I really start looking into some niche articles. But for the most part, this is a new idea coming out of a particular kind of niche within a niche of a theological movement. And the argument essentially goes like this: empathy leads to moral compromise. Empathy without constraint leads to moral compromise. Feeling too deeply for others leads you to justifying sin. Basically, if you step into someone's suffering, you lose your ability to judge objectively. On the surface, I understand, at least theologically, where they are coming from. I understand the approach they're trying to take, but I don't think that they've hit the nail on the head at all. I think they've missed it entirely. I don't think this is an empathy problem. I think this is more of a problem of discernment and about taking things seriously and spending time in holy living and in holiness. But empathy isn't about abandoning truth. It's about understanding why people are hurting. It's about relating to them. It's about getting into the muck with them and then being willing to be with them, just like Jesus did. So, yeah, Steve, let us know. What have you heard as far as where does this even come from?
So you have one of the books there. There's 2 books that just came out recently. There's The Sin of Empathy by Joe
Rigney.
and the other one was Toxic Empathy by Allie Beth Stuckley. These 2 books are trying to take a look at what you said, essentially that empathy is something that can become dangerous if we let it get out of hand or whatever else. Now, each book is trying to say something a little bit differently, though, where the book Toxic Empathy is actually saying that empathy can be weaponized. It's something that you can use empathy as a way to guilt somebody into agreeing with you. Whereas the sin of empathy is actually more just saying that empathy is dangerous. And the more that we care for other people, the more that we are willing to be overly permissive. At the end of the day, what they are both actually saying is that there is an extreme to empathy, which I don't think anybody is going to deny. In my post, I said, can empathy lead to permissiveness? Yes. But what we have to recognize in all of these situations is that makes permissiveness the issue. Or like you use the word discernment, that makes discernment the issue. If we empathize with somebody and that leads us to sin, empathy is not the issue. Our self-control, our wisdom, our brain moderation is truly the issue here. Empathy is something that is absolutely vital to not just our faith. Like I could go into a lot of deep theology here and things like that, and I'm not sure if you want me to really go into a lot of the deep theology here. Do you want me to talk about some of that stuff?
Yeah, we'll dive into theology for sure.
We have to understand that Jesus becoming flesh was empathy. The book of Hebrews says that we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with all of our weaknesses, tempting in every way that we were tempted. Essentially just saying that God didn't want to come to earth, wave a magical wand and save us. He made an intentional point to incarnate in flesh, to experience the world as we experience it, to eat food, to probably get sick sometimes, to laugh with friends. You know, I'm writing a book right now, and a big part of this is seeing how Jesus celebrated, how he partied, how he made friends. Empathy was a huge part of what he did. He even died a human death. He went to the extremes of allowing himself to die a human death, feeling human pain. He didn't need to do any of this stuff, but he chose to come down. Peter writes that he was at the right hand of God and chose to leave that behind and to come to earth as a man.
Mm.
This is empathy. Without empathy, we don't have Christ. Without empathy, we don't have salvation as we know it. But even on top of this, it's just part of being a good human being. If somebody is a humanist, let's say, to be a humanist means to be able to look at other people and say, I recognize that they have needs, and they can recognize that I have needs. And therefore, what can we best do to help us all out? Unless your goal is to go out there and say, I'm looking out for number one exclusively, I'm going to walk over every person I have to walk over to get exactly what I want. Unless you're doing that, you must have some sort of empathy in your life. You have to.
There's been some research done on this concept of parochial empathy. And so talking about like the intergroup empathy and saying that whenever we really only need to watch out for our own. A lot of the arguments of excessive empathy are those that go beyond the borders and those around us of the inside group. But the irony of that argument is, first off, I think the studies themselves are saying the opposite. The studies are saying that intergroup parochial empathy is the problem, and that instead we need to work on the wall list version. But even still, like as a Christian, as a believer, there's no more opposite sentiment that could be true. Mm-hmm. We are not called to love the intergroup. Like we already got them. We're to go beyond. We're to go out. We have been commissioned to those outside of our group to bring them in. And that is in and of itself an effort of empathy. The danger lies the more we allow this to fester, the more we think that is true, the more we allow ourselves to believe that empathy is the problem. It starts to feel a lot like the Pharisees. It starts to feel a lot like legalism. It starts to feel like we're dehumanizing the person and instead being very concerned with ourselves and our own work. But that is so closed off. That is so inside of ourselves and inside of our brain. And again, I think it is the opposite of what we're called to do in our holiness. We're not called to be holy and set apart so that we are set above. We are set with. We are set apart with the people. We are to be holy. We're to be pious. We're to be intentional in our faith amongst everyone else.
Even the word church in ancient Greek is this word ekklesia, which means the called out ones. And what would happen is somebody would be walking down the street in your neighborhood and they would just be shouting out, hey, yo, it's time for church. Hey, yo. They would literally be calling people out of their homes, out into their community. This voice was meant to be heard through the entire community. Hey, everybody, we want you to be with us. Everybody, we want you to be here. People were literally being called out of their homes to join within the church. Again, literally, the Greek word is the called out ones. Without some sort of empathy, if you're looking exclusively within yourself, you're not calling out in a neighborhood, you're passing notes. You're having secret little missions where you're only talking within your in-group. It becomes a secret society of people. But when you look at what you have and the gift that God has given you through Christ, you look at others and you say, I want them to have that too. I remember what it felt like to not have him. I can empathize with where they are now without Christ, and I want them to have what I have. Therefore, you call out, you go to people, you go into the world to tell people these things. Empathy, again, is a vital part of our faith.
Mm-hmm. And I think if we are to be Christians, if we are to be like Christ, if we are to emulate our leader, we have this Jesus who was crucified and looks at the people and says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. That's empathy. Like that in and of itself is downright foolish empathy, but of course it's not, because this is our example. So unless we believe Jesus to be a fool, we should look at our example. Somebody showing us just how radical that we would give, not just our coat, but our shirt as well, in an act of radical empathy.
Man, you just hit on a great parable that Christ uses. He's touching on all these legal things that are happening about giving somebody a coat or walking a mile. One of the things that the Romans would do is if a Roman soldier was approaching, you would be required to carry his pack for a mile because this person was walking across miles and miles and miles of area. So a random person would be required to carry it for 1 mile. And Jesus, but for the Israeli people, for the Hebrews, this was an occupying force. This was the weapons that you were carrying were the weapons that took over your land. So you could see where they would be like, I don't want to carry your gear. I don't want to carry this stuff. This is the tools that took over my area. And Jesus says, don't just carry it the mile, carry it an extra mile. Go 2, because you know what it's like to carry heavy burdens. Yes, the whole overarching situation may be rough, but this one human being, show them how they are loved. Show them that you understand what it's like to carry a heavy pack and that it sucks. For somebody to carry it for an extra mile for you can mean the world to this person. Like, yeah, it's everywhere, right? It's everywhere in the Gospels. It's everywhere in Scripture. Just Christ calling us to empathy.
Absolutely. And I promised this would be about games, and that is true. And I've mentioned this before, but I'll try and get this into a nutshell. And that is that I think that art is an echo of the Imago Dei. I think that the art that we create is an echo of God. And so whenever we create because we were created by a creator. Long story short, there's a full video if you're going to watch it. Can Christians watch anime? You can talk about it. I think that games in and of themselves are this exact opportunity for us to practice empathy. The games that Steve and I love, the reason that we play them is because they are opportunities for us to gamify empathy, for us to step into the shoes of someone else and to experience their pain or to see choices that they might have to make. My effervescent beloved Undertale literally presents that at its outset. And from the very beginning, you are given the opportunity to show mercy. You are given the opportunity to choose a pacifist route where you don't kill anything, right? Like being the game where you don't have to kill any monsters. That is a big deal. That is an opportunity for us to empathize with the forever villain of video games being the RPG monster across from you. This is in and of itself the opportunity for us to step into the shoes of a Frisk and to say, how can I show mercy? And how can I do everything in my power, work as hard as I can, and try to finagle the system until the game lets me show mercy? What a powerful instance.
Man, and Undertale is this great example because if you don't, you will be called out on it. There
Right.
will be a point in the game when a character looks you in the face and said you had an option and you chose not to. And I wish there were more instances these days in which somebody who is a part of the group that is being marginalized or the group that is not being shown empathy can look somebody in the face and say, you had a choice and you chose not to. And Undertale does it so well.
That's one good example. I've just finished watching the very first Walking Dead Telltale game. I had never played them before, and so I'm watching somebody play them. And that is once again, like over and over, these tough choices and talking about who do you choose. Like I think one of the first choices that you have to make in the game is who do you save between two characters, and the other character, like it is a Walking Dead storyline, so they pull no punches, and that character just dies. And like that is just the story from that point on. And it is the conundrum of having to make a choice between these two people you have not met before, and you have no idea where they're going to go from this point on. But you have to make that choice. You have to be the one, because it doesn't really give you the option to not choose. So you got to pull that lever one way or the other.
Well, one of my all-time favorite examples of this is going to be the first Hellblade game, Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. If you can't see it, it's off screen here, but I've got a picture of Senua right back here on my shelf. She's one of my all-time favorite game characters, but the first game is all about you living in the head, almost canonically living in the head of a mentally ill young woman who's trying to process her boyfriend, her fiance, whatever, somebody she deeply loves, dying. And she is processing this by going into the underworld, going to hell, and trying to retrieve his soul to bring it back to his body. And all the while, so many wild things are happening. She's hearing voices, and you are asking yourself, is any of this real? Is any of this real? but the question's never answered because it doesn't matter because it's real to her.
Mm.
You're getting to experience this from her shoes where sure, us on the outside might be asking ourselves, okay, but does she really need to be acting this way? Does she really need to be doing this? But when we are put in her shoes and able to experience this as she is, we get to see that she needs to work through this in some way. This is an important thing for her to be able to handle in some way. The creators of the game even went to people who struggle like with schizophrenia and voice hearing and whatnot, and they asked, "Are we making this accurate enough that we are properly representing your mental illness?" And they redid it to the point that people said yes. And so to be able to play this game and then meet somebody who struggles with these illnesses and be able to, in some teeny tiny way, be able to say, I understand you a little bit better now.
Mm.
I can empathize a little bit more than I was before. It's so good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I talk about these things every single week. Like every game that we cover pretty much in our nerdy sermons has to do with this kind of idea of stepping into the shoes of the other, of the person who's either doing wrong or is having to choose between right and wrong or having to weigh out some kind of moral choice. The one I'll close with here for me, at least on game front, is one that forces you to do bad before showing you the bad, and that is Hotline Miami, which is an interesting one. It's one that I have a lot of like tough times recommending because it is so visceral, but the gist is that you are this homicidal maniac who goes into these rooms like mafia gangster style and shoots everyone until they're all dead. But then the game does something that normally games like this don't do. It makes you, the music pans out and it makes you walk back through the level. And so after you've done all the bad that you've done, no longer is the cool electric guitar shredding. No longer are you amped up or feeling anything. You're having to walk back through corpses and gore to realize what you've done. And that is one of those moments that still sends chills down my spine because I remember
Yeah.
first experiencing it and being like, oh no, I was just playing a game though, but I was just playing a game. But of course it like was trying to tell a deeper story of like, don't become desensitized to this. Don't forget that you are human, you are empathetic, and you need to realize this choice you've made. So before we get into the last little bit here of why this matters and what Checkpoint and SavePoint are doing about it, I want to turn to the chat because we've got some great comments here and thoughts. TGC dropped a little bit of some moments that struck them in particular. So Final Fantasy always bring in the hits with some good impact and emotional storytelling, especially in those later chapters and moments that just are tearjerkers. Nier Automata was one that I almost brought up here as one of the games because, of course, that is one that does a similar thing to Hotline Miami, where you eventually realize that all of these robots that you've been taking down might be a bit more humanized than you realize. And Marlena brings out God of War Ragnarok. Freya is attacking Kratos and Atreus and is about to uncontrollably attack back. And Kratos says, "You do not want to do this. She was our friend." Kratos standing up for his kid and not wanting to become a monster.
I'm going to try and talk about my experience with God of War Ragnarok. I might cry because it's so good, but I didn't play it until after I was a father. And being a dad and playing that game from that perspective was incredible because both the remake, 2018 God of War, not remake, but the 2018 and and Ragnarok, he is very clearly just trying to say, I want you to be better than me. And I'm flawed. And to empathize with that so deeply, this like I want you to be better than I was. Like I want you to learn from my mistakes and not have the same pitfalls, especially when you are in such a place of power as they are in God of War. And to be able to just say like, there's a moment in Ragnarok where he looks at Atreus and he says, I was wrong. I was wrong. And it's just this huge, important moment of admitting to your child, I'm not perfect. You may see me as this like stalwart, watershed, monolith, every other metaphor that I could think of. But the truth is, I'm a human, and the only thing that separates us is experience. And sometimes I'm going to be wrong. You're talking about one of the most like infamous ones for you. For me, the most infamous moment of where I just felt like a game just changed for me, like video gaming itself changed for me, was the first BioShock game.
Mm.
And what Andrew Ryan is standing there telling you, so quick story thing, you find out that you've been mind controlled the entire time. You didn't know it, but now you're standing in front of a guy named Andrew Ryan, and the person who's controlling your mind says, "Would you kindly?" That's the mind control trigger. "Would you kindly kill him?" And it gives you one button prompt to swing your weapon. And I didn't want to, and so I put my controller down. And I think I waited for the other option to pop up because games up to that point had been options for me and choice and all kinds of other things. But at this moment, I, the player, was being controlled. I was being controlled exactly like the character in the game, and I didn't have a choice. And staring at this moment and thinking to myself, they're not going to let me get out of this, are they? And it's not just like I have to watch this person do it. I have to push the button. I have to be the one to get in there and do this. I have to do that. And oh man, feeling myself pull that trigger or push that button and hating myself the entire time I was doing it had to be exactly what that character was feeling at that moment. I am doing this because you're making me do it, and I hate every second of it. So can I go on a small rant here?
Sure.
Okay, I already have. I'm going to continue going. I think, hot take this time, I genuinely think gaming is the highest form of art we have right now because it is the only form of art in which you can one-to-one empathize with the story that you are within. Every other art form has you experience it from an outside perspective. And there's ways that's great, there's ways that that's good, there's ways that that's beautiful. But gaming puts you in the shoes of these characters. Like Last of Us 2 is another great example of this. Last of Us 2 is a good game with a great story. I would not call it fun. There were so many times in that game that I didn't want to do this. Yeah. And you hate yourself for doing it. And as you continue through the game, you almost feel a loathing for it, right? It's not fun to play. But that's what Ellie is feeling. That's what both characters are feeling. They're getting through this knowing there's got to be a difference between surviving and being alive. And you as a player are thinking to yourself, there's got to be a difference between getting through a game and enjoying this game. Like there's just so much empathy that can be brought when you were put in the shoes, in the souls and the eyes of a character, and you are the one pushing the buttons, you are the one making the movements, you are the one making the choices. That is empathy.
You'll find no hot take here. That is exactly why I think this conversation is so necessary and why I think games are the perfect medium for us to pin up against this argument that the sin of empathy is folly, and it's simply missing the forest for the trees of the capability of human creativity and of the human divine connection of storytelling and like understanding the why of art and the purpose of art and how it affects us. Bringing it forward into how we actually do better or do this thing in a different way or look at this angle in a more Christian light and boots on the ground actually do the work. I wanted to bring up what Marlena said there, and I think that it hits at it pretty well. She says, I think it's interesting that the same people believe in the sin of empathy are the same folks that tell women to self-sacrifice and practice unhealthy forgiveness. I appreciate Steve saying it's about recognizing we all have needs and should be working towards achieving all our needs together. This reminded me of a concept that I think applies really well that I learned about like therapy, which I'm not a therapist. This is from a therapist, but talking very much about like the role of somebody experiencing, of somebody working with somebody experiencing trauma is not to try to pull them out, but it is instead to get into the water with them, get into the muck so that both of you can get out. And I think that that is such a like stark example of why empathy is important in how we do justice, in how we handle this world that we're living in and seeing the injustice, seeing the sin, seeing the brokenness as Christians, as we want to see heaven here on earth. We get down and we enter into that space and we enter into it with them to bring them with us, to go somewhere together, to realize something deeper on the other side. That is, I think, what we're doing. And that's vital work for SavePoint, vital work for
Mm.
Checkpoint. It's vital work for any church that is taking this thing seriously. And instead of just kind of laying down ideologies, is actually doing the work to be like Christ here in this life. This is a major why for me as to why Checkpoint exists, is that often it was a lack of empathy that led to the church not reaching the gamer. Is because we thought they lived in their mom's basement. We thought they stunk. We thought they needed to dress better to walk into the church building and needed to change their life and turn it around to enter our spaces. And so a part of my work was going to the spaces where the nerds, the geeks, and the gamers were and saying, like, you matter, you are worth it, and we want to form church here. We want to be a part of this thing that you're doing. And I think in a similar vein, what SavePoint is doing, and I won't put words in your mouth, but I'll let you say it, is going to these nerds, geeks, and gamers in the space where they are and saying, there are people out there that are willing to get down into the muck with you. They are there not to judge you, but to be a part of your life.
Well, what we are seeing more and more and more is without empathy, you're only ever addressing symptoms of people, of humanity and whatnot. So to use just a very, very basic like example metaphor here is, let's just say it's like overeating, right? So if somebody's overeating and immediately you would think, well, then just go take all the food away. But that's not going to solve the problem. Oh, well, then regulate their food. That's not going to solve the problem either. Stop thinking about the food. You need to talk to the person and find out why they're overeating. You need to go to, and get in there with them. And without being able to meet somebody and talk to them, you talk about this stereotype that gamers are people in their basement and they don't shower and they haven't grown up or whatever else. Number one, that's an offensive stereotype, but let's pretend it were true. Saying that and dismissing that does nothing to help those people. Finding a way to invite those people in or go to them and get to know them, then you get to find out, hey man, do you have like social anxiety? Is that like a part of the problem here? Or do you just find yourself connecting with people online more than you find yourself connecting with people in the real world? Or, hey, let's talk. I want to know you. I want to see you. So this is SavePoint's whole idea is there are people that just, they feel like the only place that they're seen is online. And we want to help people when they're comfortable and when they're ready, find a physical space in which they can be seen. There is this like idea of church that has unfortunately been really reinforced, but there's an idea of church that it doesn't want nerds. It doesn't want gamers. They don't want to hear about video games. They don't want to hear about Dungeons and Dragons. They don't want to hear about any of that stuff. Church does not want that. We find these churches that love these things. And then we find people in that area, and our whole goal, like literally my favorite part of what we do is when somebody goes to a church for the very first time, we have somebody waiting at the front door for them who already knows their name and something that they're into. So that when they walk in the door, they can say, hey, Nate, nice to meet you, man. Hey, I heard you really like anime. What anime have you been into? And immediately you can begin empathizing with somebody. Immediately you can begin seeing somebody on their level. And when somebody feels seen, then they can begin to open up a little more and they can begin to do a little more. But when we just stop and we look at people and we say, I don't need to feel what you're feeling. Here are all of your problems. Fix them. Here's everything you're doing right. Keep that up. Done. Full stop. We don't get past the surface at any point. We need to get deeper.
Whenever we try to take control, whenever we try to assume these things, we turn people into problems. We turn them into a checklist. We stop seeing them as like the Imago Dei. We stop seeing them as beloved Christ bearers, image bearers. As soon as we stop seeing that, to me, it starts to reek of this self-serving belief that we're the ones who save souls instead of being the ones who are just introducing them to transformative power. We are not the transformers. We are not the soul savers. We are here to introduce them to Jesus, who will change their life. We're here to allow God to do something amazing through the work of salvation and sanctification and these wonderful Asian words that we want to introduce them to, but we got to get them there to that point. And so whenever we just assume that it's us doing any of it, that is where this whole thing starts to break down for me. is that is if we're going to talk too much about how do we do compassion right or wrong, how do we do empathy right or wrong, we are missing the forest for the trees. We're making it too much about us and forgetting that this is a spiritual matter that is happening out of our hands, and that we are not the ones doing this anyway. We just need to be good and faithful servants, good and faithful stewards of what we've been given, because we want to see transformative work happen. We don't want to be the ones doing the transformative work.
That's something that we had to deal with right off the bat at SavePoint, that we as a board, we as a group had to come to terms with and accept, is that we cannot be the gatekeepers of who can and cannot share the gospel.
Hmm.
We can't be people who say, you know what, because we have theological, like minor theological differences, you don't deserve to share the gospel with people in your area. That seems like something that makes us the people that save people, right?
Mm-hmm.
That means that we're the ones that are doing the work, not the Holy Spirit that are prompting people into a relationship with Christ. Who am I? Who am I to say that a Catholic church cannot have the Holy Spirit move through them? And so we set our little border is, do you teach that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and it's through him and him alone that he is saved? And the Bible is like we have some really clear minimum, kind of like the Apostles' Creed, almost like, or the Nicene Creed.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of those creeds are really our foundation. And beyond that, I promise you, Nate, I promise you there's some theological things that you and I would disagree on. But I would hope to God that would never make you say, I don't want Steve to I don't want to send anybody to Steve. Like, I don't want Steve to be able to teach people about Jesus. No, that would break my heart. And in the same way, because I know that would break my heart, I know I could never do that to you. I guarantee you, I know for a fact, we have sent people to churches that I disagree with theologically. But they're all minor theological differences. When it comes to the core of the gospel, we share that. And I know that these people just want other people to meet Jesus. And who am I to deny them that opportunity?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a huge part of SavePoint, is be able to admit that we are not the people who save anybody. We have to stand back and let people be seen where they can be seen, be known where they can be known. Maybe I'm not going to be the best person to empathize with somebody. Well, then I want to find a place for them where there are going to be people who can empathize with them.
As we wrap this up, I want to issue a challenge to folks, and that is that when we come to games, when we experience real life, when we talk about our faith, and when we deal with all of these things within the ramifications of empathy and how we choose to portray it, all of these things come down to intention. They come down to choice. They come down to what we actually do. What are the actual actions? How do we let the story unfold? And so the question that I have for you is, are you going to choose to show mercy? Are you going to choose the pacifist route? Are you going to choose to go above and beyond and to choose to empathize? Because I believe that Jesus played the pacifist route. I believe that he was a healer. I believe that he wept. I believe that he stepped into our suffering. I believe that in the midst of his suffering that we inflicted, he still says, forgive them. That is the Jesus that I follow, and that is the Jesus that I offer. And so if we truly want to take that seriously and follow Christ, that's what I'm going to encourage you to do as well. Any last thoughts from you, Steve?
Remember, without empathy, we're not saved. Without Christ looking to us and his heart breaking for what he saw and knowing that we are humans, who we are, him feeling what we feel, being tempted as we've been tempted, we would just be punished. We would get we would get exactly what we deserve, and it would be not good for us, right? So in the exact same way, we have to look at the rest of the world with that exact same amount of compassion and empathy. Yes, please, I also want to beg you, make sure that you are not also being permissive. Check the things that you're saying and that you're allowing against scripture. Make sure that you are doing what's best for people in love. Sometimes that means a rebuke. Sometimes that means telling people they need to stop something or whatever else. But at the end of the day, ask yourself, why? Why is this person doing what they're doing? Why are they feeling what they're feeling? What's in their heart right now? And reach that and feel that with them. Truly, listeners, go celebrate with those who celebrate. weep with those who weep, love with those who love. Man, go empathize because it makes a beautiful, beautiful world.